For the last 15 years or so, Red Bull have been a prominent name in Formula 1, turning their energy drink brand into a multiple championship winning constructor. Now off track, Red Bull remains the global leader in the energy drink sector, but have never been a runaway champion, with their biggest competitors Monster Energy constantly challenging them on the shelves, but also having their foot in Formula 1 after their sponsorship of Mercedes and now the McLaren team. But what if Monster took charge of their own team, entered the sport as a full constructor, forcing direct head-to-head competition for Red Bull Racing? So to see how this would happen, I loaded up F125 MyTeam, created a brand new team with the driver lineup of Franco Colapinto and Formula 3 icon Callum Voisin, and simulated the next 10 seasons in the pinnacle of motorsport. The 2025 Formula 1 season ends as many would expect, McLaren winning the Constructors' Championship with Ferrari finishing as the runners-up, while Red Bull beat Mercedes to finish in 3rd place. The brand new Monster Energy Formula 1 team struggle in their first season, and they finished down in P11, but do manage to secure their first points. Callum Voisin would finish near the bottom after his jump from Formula 3 to Formula 1, with Colapinto scoring the only points to finish in P18. Both Ferraris do miss out on the top 3, with Lando Norris finishing just 18 points ahead of Leclerc to finish in 3rd place. He is beat by his teammate, with Oscar Piastri only managing to finish as the runner-up, much like where he currently sits in real life. This means the first Drivers' Championship of the simulation will be won by the Red Bull driver of Max Verstappen, showing the new energy drink team how it's done. There would be 5 different race winners, with Verstappen's dominant performance being capped off with 9 race wins. Oscar Piastri would manage to win 3 times, with his teammate only winning once. The Ferrari driver of Charles Leclerc would manage to win 2 races, while George Russell was also able to take his Mercedes to a single race win. Now a huge silly season is sparked by Yuki Tsunoda retiring at the end of the first season, just like in Volkswagen's last attempt. 3rd place Lando Norris will jump over to the Red Bull team in hopes of securing a championship, with Nico Hülkenberg jumping over to a potential title winning McLaren. The open seat left at the kick Sauber is then given to Victor Martins, who will make his debut next year. Now arguably one of the greatest drivers of all time, Lewis Hamilton is set to retire at the end of the first season, with Kimi Antonelli making the switch to the Italian team, while Pierre Gasly moves over to join Mercedes. Callum Voisin will leave the Monster team after his debut season to drive for Haas, as Esteban Ocon moves over to Williams, replacing Carlos Sainz, who will join the newest team. Lando Norris was set to partner Max Verstappen at Red Bull, but Max will leave the team and even the sport, not taking another seat anywhere else, allowing Isaac Hadjar to be promoted to the senior Red Bull team. The 2 other rookies joining Martins will be Red Bull junior Pepe Marti, who joins Alpine, and Alpine Academy driver Paul Aron, who is set to join the Racing Bulls. I'm pretty sure EA have now changed the regulation changes, as they seem to happen every season, with the chassis department being the first and only sector being hit. The slight regulation changes did affect the top of the constructor standings, with the reigning champions McLaren falling to 4th after losing Lando Norris. This opens the door for Ferrari to return to championship glory for the first time in almost 20 years. Monster Energy made major improvements to move halfway up the standings this season, as they managed to finish in P6. These improvements were made by both drivers, with Colapinto moving up to finish in P13, with his new teammate Carlos Sainz managing to finish as high as P11. Last season's runner-up Oscar Piastri would fall to 3rd place this season, just ahead of George Russell, but will finish this season behind his former teammate, as Lando Norris secures the runner-up spot in his debut season at Red Bull. And with Max Verstappen out of Formula 1, a new champion will be crowned. This means that the Ferrari driver of Charles Leclerc will finally take his first ever Drivers' Championship, outscoring Lando Norris by almost 30 points. Norris would actually win the most races this season after he won 7 times, while the champion of Leclerc would only win 6. 3rd place Oscar Piastri would only win a single race, while George Russell continued to win races as he took another 2. Now, unfortunately, after a strong season from Colapinto, he will leave Formula 1, with Oliver Behrman making the jump over to the Monster team. Both Jack Doohan and Liam Lawson will also leave the sport, with Fernando Alonso making a return to the Alpine team. Isaac Hadjar leaves Red Bull after just a single season, with Max Verstappen making a return to his home team. The remaining seat at Racing Bulls will be given to Tim Tramnett, while Haas signed Zach O'Sullivan to provide his debut for next year. Now also going into next season will be the regulation changes, these affecting the aerodynamics and powertrain departments. The 3rd season sees a 3rd different Constructors champion, as Ferrari fall to 3rd place, with Red Bull Racing rising to the top. The Monster Energy team remain in P6, finishing around 20 points behind Williams. Carlos Sainz remains consistent to finish slightly higher in P10, with the new signing Oliver Behrman scoring 24 points to finish in P12. Both Piastri and Norris drop out of the top 3 this season, with Max Verstappen returning to the sport to finish in 3rd place. George Russell makes his first appearance in the top 3 to take his Mercedes to runner-up spot, but does fall short by just 13 points to the reigning champion Charles Leclerc, who was able to secure back-to-back World Drivers' Championships. He would be the most successful driver this year after winning 5 races, with Verstappen not far behind after he won 4. Runner-up George Russell would win 3 races, while Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly and both McLaren drivers of Piastri and Nico Hülkenberg all win a single race each. Now after just a single season back at Alpine, Fernando Alonso decides to retire, and is replaced at Alpine by Nikola Solov. Nico Hülkenberg secured his first ever race win and will call it a day on his career, with Alex Albon jumping over to McLaren and Isaac Hadjar making the move over to Williams, with the other Williams driver making a swap over to Aston Martin. The last seat at Williams allows the team to bring in Liam Lawson as he makes his return to Formula 1. Callum Voisin is dropped by Haas in favour of Paul Aron, with Jack Crawford being brought in by the Racing Bulls. Red Bull and McLaren swap drivers, which will see Verstappen drive in Papaya and Piastri moving up to Milton Keynes. Now both the aerodynamics and powertrain departments will once again be hit with regulation changes in consecutive seasons. This season will see the champions return to the very top of the constructors' standings, with McLaren winning their second title in this simulation after winning their first in the first season. Last season's champions Red Bull fall down to 4th place, finishing just ahead of the newest team of Monster Energy. Now both Monster drivers do gain 2 positions each, with Carlos Sainz moving up to P8, while Oliver Behrman jumps into the top 10. Last year's runner-up George Russell falls down to 3rd place this season, being overtaken by Lando Norris, who will take his Red Bull back into the top 3. The reigning champion Charles Leclerc fails to secure another Drivers' Championship, missing out by just under 40 points. Now the latest Drivers' Champion will not be a new face, but Max Verstappen returning to the top of the standings, but this time driving for the Constructors' Champions of McLaren. Now he would end the season with a whopping 8 race wins, with Charles Leclerc only being able to manage half after he took 4. Both Lando Norris and George Russell would then take half of that, after both drivers would win a pair of races. Now at the end of season 4, the Monster Energy driver of Carlos Sainz is set to retire from Formula 1, with the new team bringing in race winner George Russell to take the team to the next step. Alex Albon then makes the jump over to the Mercedes team, with Franco Colapinto returning to Formula 1 to drive for the champions of McLaren. Aston Martin driver of Lance Stroll leaves the sport, with Liam Lawson taking his spot, Zach O'Sullivan jumping over to Williams, and Jack Doohan returning to drive for Haas. The powertrain department is then once again hit by regulation changes for the 3rd season in a row. The reigning champions of McLaren managed to retain their Constructors' Championship, with the gap to runners-up Ferrari shrinking ever so slightly. Changes come from the Monster Energy team as they continue to move their way up the standings to finish 3rd after just the 5th season. Oliver Behrman also jumps up a position, with their newest signing George Russell having an incredible debut season to finish in P4. Russell stays in P4 despite moving teams, much like Lando Norris, who stays 3rd place in the drivers' standing. In fact, none of the top 6 drivers changes places, with the runner-up this season once again being Charles Leclerc, as the McLaren driver of Max Verstappen taking another driver's title, taking his total to 7. While the order remained the same, there was a much larger point gap between the top 2, after Verstappen secured 9 race wins compared to Leclerc's 4. George Russell managed another 2 race wins, also securing the Monster team's first race wins, with Lando Norris winning a single race. Now another driver is set to retire at the end of season 5, with the Mercedes driver of Pierre Gasly hanging up his steering wheel, as Oscar Piastri moves over to the Silver Arrows. Oliver Behrman will also leave Formula 1 after failing to secure another seat, with runner-up Charles Leclerc joining Monster to continue their impressive rise. Liam Lawson makes a surprising jump over to the top Ferrari team. Jack Doohan then takes the Aston Martin drive, allowing Richard Verschoor to drive for Haas, while the last remaining seat at Red Bull is provided for Zane Maloney, who will make his Formula 1 debut next year. This year's regulation changes will then continue to affect the powertrain department, this time being joined by the chassis and durability departments. As we head into the second half of the simulation, McLaren are toppled as Ferrari return to championship glory for the first time since season 2. McLaren themselves drop down to P5, with the Monster team remaining in 3rd place despite being overtaken by Mercedes. George Russell drops down from P4 to P8 this year, with his new teammate Charles Leclerc remaining in P4. With the shake-up of drivers this year, Lando Norris drops down to P5, with Oscar Piastri returning to the top 3 in his new Mercedes car. With last season's top 2 drivers finishing outside the top 3 this year, 2 brand new faces will be seen. The runner-up this year is the new Ferrari driver of Liam Lawson, who makes his first ever appearance in the top 3 and is only beaten by his teammate, with Kimi Antonelli taking his inevitable first Drivers' Championship. Antonelli would take a point more than double his teammate after Kimi would take 11 race wins while Liam Lawson failed to win any. Oscar Piastri would take 2 race wins much like Charles Leclerc, with George Russell also being able to secure another race win. Alex Albon is the latest driver set to leave the sport, with Gabriel Bortoleto jumping over to Mercedes, while Lance Stroll will return to drive for Kick Sauber. Zach O'Sullivan will lose his Williams seat and will leave Formula 1 as well, with Jack Doohan once again taking his seat, while Richard Verschoor moves over to the Aston Martin team. Nikola Solov remains in Formula 1, making a switch over to Haas, while former Monster Energy driver Oliver Behrman returns to drive for Alpine. Now once again the partnership of the chassis and powertrain departments will be hit with some more regulation changes. Now there's no major changes at the top of the Constructors' Championship, with Ferrari continuing to dominate, finishing at the top ahead of Mercedes and the Monster Energy team, who stay in 3rd place. George Russell does make some major improvements this year as he rises back up to finish in P4, but will still finish behind his teammate Charles Leclerc, finishing 3rd, marking Monster's first entry into the top 3. Oscar Piastri makes improvements to move to the runner-up spot as well, but still finishes miles behind the reigning champion. Kimi Antonelli would once again finish at the top of the standings for a second consecutive Drivers' Championship after his 12 race wins would take him 142 points clear of Oscar Piastri. Piastri himself would only manage to win 3 times, while Charles Leclerc takes his monster car to another race win. Both Jack Doohan and Paul Aron would then lose their seats from Formula 1, with Pepe Marti moving over to Haas, with Alex Albon returning to drive for Alpine. Bortoleto then leaves Mercedes after just a single season in favour of Aston Martin, with Lando Norris then signing for the Silver Arrows. The last open seat at Red Bull will then be given to Formula 3 icon Matteo Zagazzetta, who will make his Formula 1 debut next year. And every season since Season 2 has seen regulation changes to the powertrain department, and this year is no different, with their aerodynamics also being hit this time round. The top 3 of the Constructors' Championship will see no change, with Ferrari remaining at the top, ahead of Mercedes and the Monster team. The Haas team, however, will make major improvements, which sees them shoot up from P8 up to P4 as they end this season. George Russell fails to re-enter the top 3, finishing down in P6, over 100 points behind 3rd place. Lando Norris would be that 3rd place driver, finishing ahead of his old new teammate Oscar Piastri. The Monster Energy driver Charles Leclerc remains in the runner-up spot, where finishes 22 points behind the reigning, defending, undisputed champion of Formula 1, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Now Antonelli is able to take his 3rd title in a row, but other drivers are starting to catch up, as he only takes 7 race wins being added to his career tally. Both Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris were able to win 4 races each, with Liam Lawson taking his first ever race win as he finished in P5. Oscar Piastri finished behind Lando once again and will leave Mercedes and take a break from the sport, with none other than Max Verstappen swapping McLaren for Mercedes. Oliver Behrman is also dropped with nowhere else to go, with Zane Maloney jumping over to Alpine. The last 2 open seats provide debuts for Paul Aron at McLaren and Taylor Barnard, who will sign for Red Bull. The Monster Energy team also step up their game by signing champion Kimi Antonelli, with George Russell moving over to the Ferrari team. The powertrain department is finally spared this season, with all the other departments being hit with some more regulation changes. Heading into the penultimate season, and Ferrari are stopped, as the newest Monster Energy Formula 1 team rise to the top and secure their first ever Constructors' Championship. Mercedes move up to finish as runners-up, with Haas remaining in P4. Last season's runner-up Charles Leclerc falls out of the top 3 this year, finishing down in 4th place, just behind the Mercedes of Max Verstappen, who returns to the top 3 for the first time since his championship win in Season 5. George Russell is able to adapt to driving his new Ferrari as he finishes as the runner-up, but once again no one is able to stop Kimi Antonelli from securing yet another driver's title, even after he moved over to the Monster team. He would finish ahead of George Russell by just 12 points, but managed 7 wins compared to Russell's 3. The other Monster driver of Charles Leclerc was also able to secure 3 race wins, while Verstappen, Norris and Liam Lawson would all win just a single race each. Now just before the final season, Ferrari decided to drop Liam Lawson despite his success, signing Gabriel Bortoleto in his place. Taylor Barnard moves over to the Aston Martin team, with Zane Maloney returning to Red Bull and Esteban Ocon eventually returning to Alpine. Lance Stroll is then dropped by Kick Sauber, with Zach O'Sullivan being brought back to the sport, while the final seat at Williams goes to Oscar Piastri after his year away from Formula 1. We also now return to having the powertrain department being hit by regulation changes, this time being paired with the durability department. The final season remains pretty similar to Season 9, with Monster Energy team remaining at the very top of the standings to win their second consecutive Constructors' Championship. Mercedes and Ferrari also remain in the same place, with Haas falling down to P7, while Red Bull jump back up to P4. Charles Leclerc will remain in P4 this season, finishing just behind George Russell, who manages to remain in the top 3. Max Verstappen is able to improve on his result from last year, moving up to the runner-up spot, but it's still no match for the champion of Kimi Antonelli, taking a second title while driving for Monster Energy. Now despite winning the title, Kimi actually wouldn't win the most races across the season, as George Russell managed a total of 6, while both Antonelli and Max Verstappen would win 4. Gabriel Bortoleto was also able to take his first ever race wins as we end the final season. And that is 10 seasons simulated with the Monster Energy Formula 1 team. Now let's combine the numbers from the entire decade and find out who the most successful drivers were. Now first, let's have a look at the most successful teams after 4 different constructors were able to secure a championship. Red Bull Racing were only able to secure a single title, being defeated by their new rivals of Monster Energy after they managed to secure 2. McLaren would go on to win a total of 3 Constructors' Championship, while Ferrari ended the simulation on top after they managed to win 4. Now only 3 different drivers were able to win a Drivers' Championship, with Charles Leclerc managing to win twice, Max Verstappen securing 3 titles, while Kimi Antonelli managed to win a total of 5 championships, winning twice with the new Monster team. And only 11 drivers were able to win a Formula 1 race, with Pierre Gasly and Nico Hülkenberg only winning 1 race each. Moving over to Liam Lawson, Lewis Hamilton and Gabriel Bortoleto, who all won 2 races each, all while driving for Ferrari. Now a large jump up to 10 races was won by Oscar Piastri, and 17 won by Lando Norris before George Russell managed to win 20 times. Former champion Charles Leclerc won a total of 29 races, not too far behind Verstappen who won 35, but he finishes just short of the number 1 driver across the simulation, as Kimi Antonelli won a total of 41 different races. That is going to wrap up another video on F1 25. Now if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we've just hit 10k, which was my goal for the year. Let's see how far we can get before 2026. Links will be in the description for this amazing Monster Energy livery mod, as well as all my social media, including my Discord server, which is the best way to receive updates about uploads on this channel. But that is going to be all from me today, so I hope you have a good day, evening or night, wherever you are, and goodbye.